Gittin, page 15, beginning of a second parak, second chapter. We dealt with the previous chapter with Shaliach, with the agent bringing the get, the bill of divorce from overseas, and the sages instituted a decree that he needs to declare before us that in my present was written, in my present was signed, since you bring it from overseas to Eretz Israel. So the reason for that, one is Rava, we learn. Rava said the husband can come back later on, and he challenged the validity of the get. He may said it's fake, and the wife, or you call it the ex-wife, she have a hard time to find people to come and testify, since in those days the shayarot, the transportation was rare and hard, etc. So therefore, it's a need for him to say, "In my present was written and signed." The another component is Rabbah that said lishma, meaning part of the importance in a get is for this particular women get. Otherwise, it can be other names, other intent. So the fear is that people who live overseas are not so familiar with the rules and regulation when it's come to bill of divorce, and therefore the agent is required to say, "In my present was written, my present was signed," and he basically give an approbation to the witnesses' signatures, and therefore, even though according to both Rava and Rabbah, the agent need to say, "In my present was signed," in order to make sure that the final stage of signature on the get is valid. Rabbah add that it has to be also in the whole process, the writing by the scribe is in my presence. So and the key is that people will not mix between documentation. Just remember, the whole idea of people familiarity of documentation and recognition of signatures and writings happen later. Those who study art history, etc., only later in the late 15th century, in Mainz, in Germany, it was Gutenberg that invented the printing press, so people have copies of text and can recognize the text, etc. But up to that point, people copy by hand, was by parchment. The capability of people to read text was not so much. There's a huge amount of people that did not read at all. That part of the famous Martin Luther claim against the institution, the early Renaissance, is the idea that people, even clergy, cannot read Latin, cannot understand the text. So how much so? Here we talk about Talmudic era, which is 3rd, 4th, 5th century. For sure, there are less and less people that recognize writing, signatures, etc. So now the Mishnah elaborates in different nuances in that sense, and for sure later on we're going to elaborate. So here is the beginning of the sacred Mishnah. Hamevi get mimdinat hayam. The agent bring a get from overseas to Eretz Israel. Ve'amar, and he declare, befanai nichtav, the get, the bill of divorce was written in my presence, aval lo befanai nechtam, but the final stage of signature was not in my presence. So if you remember, we just mentioned Rabbah that said it may happen that the signature was not lishma, was not for the sake of that woman. Or versus befanai nechtam, in my presence was signed, aval lo befanai nichtav, but not in my present was the first stage. And as we said earlier, the whole decree of the sages is to have these two component best case scenario. Lechatchila, the way it should be, is my present was written, my present was signed. Also, בפניי נכתב כולו, ובפניי נכתב חציו. Meaning, we have a form of the get, and we said many times, the Gemara in Kiddushin, page 6, said that someone who's not familiar, don't touch. Why? It's so much details, the 12 lines of the get, right? The location, the time, the witnesses, the language, the names, the expressions. It's a lot of materials that takes a long time to be familiar. Even among the rabbis themselves, since the early times, they are experts in this field that know exactly all the nuances and how to do it and what to do it. So I have a friend, I think some of you know, Rabbi Benowitz. Rabbi Benowitz of Baltimore. He is the Safar the Dainei. He's the one who sits in the bed in Baltimore. He is a lifetime in this. He wrote books and everything. You need to be very erudite, very familiar with that. So here was a situation. And he said, in my present is totally written, or in my present half of that was written. So it means when it's come to signatures, only one of them, one of the Eidim, one of the witnesses testify that the get was written or was signed in my present, but not applied to the second ed, to the second witness. Or befanai nechtav chetzio. Later we explain what chetzi, what half of the get was written. Ubefanai nechtam kulo. So again, the written of the get in half I was present, but the signature, the entire process of signatures was in my presence. So all of those four cases, we said pasul. The document, the bill of divorce document is invalid. Meaning that wife cannot marry by this any one of these four type of situation until the witnesses come and reaffirm those signatures on the get. Rabbah added to that and said it also needed to say it was written and signed for her, for the names. Tosfot and Tosfot Arosh elaborates on the details. So anyway, Ed Echad Omer Befanai Nichtav. One witness said, in my presence was written. Ve'echad Omer Befanai Nichtav. So imagine, you have two Eidim, you have two witnesses. One said, in my presence was written. One said, in my presence was signed. You see the problem? They have the two, but each of them for different components. So what happened here? Pasul, the get is not valid. Why? The sages do not depend when it's come to trust, when it's come to ne'emanut, on one witness, only if that person is the agent of the husband, even in a sense, both of them and the husband, but they come independently for each part of the get, we cannot depend on them. Only, if the husband come here and testified over that. But since the Eidut Nechelka, since the witness stand is divided between two components, each of them applies to a different one. One applies to the written process. One applies solely for what? For the signature. So therefore, in order for us to approve it, you need to go by everyone, and the Gemara later on page 16 A and B, you see two different avenues of that. How far you go with one versus two. For example, if both of them were shluchei abal, both of them were agent of the husband, you treat them differently. But again, in general, you need the whole components together, the two for the full process of the present in the time of written and the present of this time of the signatures. Shnayim omrim befanenu nechtav. The two witnesses, in our present the get was written. Ve'echad omer, and you have the third entity, the third witness that come in and said, befanai nechtam. In my present was signed. Pasul. Why? Because everything needs to be with shaliach echad, with one component. as long as he is not a shaliach, his agent, he is not in a state of trust. The sages do not depend on the agent himself, because again, you have to be in the entire process in order to be accepted as a dikom. ורבי יהודה מכשיר, רבי יהודה allowed. The big issue that some of the mefarshim have with that is the component of get, as we said many times, is not only bill of divorce. They use those days get also for general documentation. And the concern is that sometimes people who are not educated can mix between the different documentation. So anyway, but if you have אחד אומר בפניי נכתב, נכתב, one witness said in my present was, the get was written. ושניים אומרים בפנינו נחתם, versus two witnesses said in our present was signed, that's a different story. kasher. We allow that. The Gemara later on page 17 explain it, but in general, Rava hold the whole purpose of in our present written and signed, it's because the husband should not come back later and challenge the validity of the get. But here, Tosfot explain it's not applied. As a derivative from that, we can talk a little bit about the law of tzitzit. The Mishnah Berurah tells us that when it's come to, for example, mitzvah tzitzit, when you put together the pieces, the tzitzit, you have to say L'Shem mitzvah tzitzit. I'm doing it in order to fulfill Hashem commandment to put together the tzitzit. So what happened if you forget to say it? And while you're doing that, now you say L'Shem mitzvah tzitzit. So if it was lechatchila, so you have to say it at the beginning. But if it's already in the process, you're about to finish and now you realize you didn't do it, is that in a hindsight okay or not? Based on this Mishnah, it's a problematic. Because what the Mishnah tells us, if you look at the process here with the approval, you see that in general, the way we wanted, it's everything set up properly. Right?
You say it in the beginning, but you also say it every time you...
No, you say it at the beginning and then you
make the knot to you.
No, you say it at the beginning and that's it. Yes. In a Sefer Torah, soon I'm going to give you an example of a Sefer Torah, is much serious problem, because in a Sefer Torah, it's not enough to say at the beginning, L'Shem Kedushat Sefer Torah, for the purpose of writing the sacred, holy Torah, but also later on, when you have the name of Hashem, you have to, the scribe have to think and express that when he does that is for the sacred of name of Hashem. So one of the problem is if he forget to do it, it makes the part pasul. Now if you have the entire yeri'ah, the entire, what is called, not calm, it's several calms, right? The yeri'ah is like 5-6 calms, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if he didn't do it right. He forgot to have the kavanah for the name of God.
Oh, piece of cloth.
So it's a huge work. So it's not so simple, but in general, it needs to put it in gnizah. It needs to disregard it and start again from the beginning of the area, which can be a huge loss. Anyway, the Gemara said, Hatu lamali, why the Tana needs to repeat this halakha? Hatana leichad azimna. We learn at the beginning of the tractate in regards to shaliach, to agent, hamevi get mindinat hayam. If someone brings to Eretz Israel from overseas the bill of divorce, tzarich lomar, he needs to say befanai nichtav befanai nechtam, in my present was written, in my present was signed, and that was the sage's decree to do it. Otherwise the get is invalid. So the Gemara said, imehahi, if you go in that avenue, hava amina, I may think that the way it should be done, tzarich, that he needs to say that statement, ve'ilo amar, in a hindsight, if he already handed over the get to her and he didn't say it, so kasher, she allowed to get married, Tosfot explained, just by that, because the way the halakha in general, if you go by the text of the Torah itself, so the moment you hand it over, you hand it over. In general, we assume that it was lishma, for her sake. For sure, we would like to have the witnesses to validate and everything, but the way it is, just if you look at the literal text of the Torah, you hand it over to her, you assume that it was for her sake, for her, and therefore it's over. The sages said that in order to make it total valid, you have to have this statement. But that's the rabbinic extra boundaries or extra imposition to make it happen. So therefore, you may think that the rabbis have compassion on her, that she should not delay for marrying someone or do whatever is good for her just because you're waiting to those witnesses to approve it, right? Kamash Melan. So therefore the Tanna teaches us, painful statement, that the get is not valid if you do not have the witness, even in a hindsight, even b'diavad, if the witnesses not come and said, in our present was written and signed. So, all of that you should know, it's excluding what we study on page 5, that the get mitkayem bechotmav, that if you have the kosher witnesses that come and say that the signature is valid and she's already married, so we basically more lenient. The Ktav Sofer, the famous rabbi in Hungary, he teaches us from that. We learn in the book of Bereshit the famous story of Lavan, the very wicked man in a Torah, right? The story of Eliezer and Rivka. I assume you all know the story. Eliezer was servant of Abraham Avinu, and he was sent out by Abraham to find a wife for Yitzchak. And he went to that house of Lavan, Betuel, etc. So the beginning, right, he made this simanim, this sign. So they said, at the beginning they said, here is your girl, here is the wife for Isaac, Hine Rivka kach velech, take her and go. And then the text said, in a back and forth, Teshev hana'ara yamim o asor, that the girl should stay with us, maybe you stay with us several weeks, several months, a year. What is that? At the beginning you said to him, take the girl and go. And now what are you saying? Oh, you should stay here for long. How come? So he said, the Ktav Sofer said, they try hard to play the game of Eliezer, to have him backed out the deal. Because remember, he came with all those gifts. They get all the goodies and gifts. Now, they play games, right? So what they do? The beginning they said, take her. Why? Because they figure out if they are so easy to give away Rebecca, he may think that there is some deficiencies that they are hiding, because they are so quickly giving her to them. And they do not know that Eliezer made already simanim, already when he was on the top of the well, he made a simanim in Hashamayim that the heaven should show him that this is the right wife for his master's son. And then they said yamim o asor, maybe days, maybe several months, and then she said, I'll go with them regardless, right? So even without you consent, Rivka said, I'll go with him. So the whole idea is you're dealing there with the very unscrupulous people. But when it's come here, you see the sophistication and the wisdom and the compassion of our rabbis. The sages put this decree in order to make sure mainly that the children, the future generation, will not have any hotzaat la'az mamzerut, that no one will ever think that the children are illegitimate because something will happen that is not kosher, that is not right. So then the Mishnah said, if the shaliach, if the agent bring the get from overseas, and he said, בפניי נכתב חציו, בפניי נכתב כולו. The process of written half was in my present. When it's come to the signature, is totally in my present, pasul. This get is not valid. So the Gemara asks a question, hey chetzio, which half of the get this agent need to validate, meaning which part is not valid? Ileima chetzio rishon. If you tell me that that applied to what? To the first half of the get. V'ha'amar Rabbi Elazar, we learn it on page 5b. Afilu lo katav bo ela shita achat, even the shaliach. So the scribe writes only one line, meaning the first line of the get, which is the name of the husband, the name of the wife, and the location of writing the get. And therefore he knows that the purpose of the get is lishma, for that woman's sake. Shu v'no tzarich. He does not need, because all the general documentation, including the divorce document, contain two components. One, it's called the toref, which is the essence of the document, which means that they give us a very clear direction, what's the purpose of this document, and including the name of the people, the signatures, the location, etc. And therefore, you have the validation, then you have the tofes, the rest of the document. So the toef has to be for that purpose, lishma, include the statement, you are allowed to anyone else. That's something we're going to study on page 26. So Rashi tells us that the name of the husband and wife and the time, it has to be at the first line of the get. And Rabbi Elazar teaches us that if the agent saw the scribe write this line for the sake of that woman, that's sufficient to say that in my present was written. Even the scribe needs to write for her sake at least the word, you are hareyat muteret lekol adam, you are allowed to get married to anyone else. That it's not part of the first line, but since the Meiri said the first line is for her sake, the rest we accepted for her sake. So anyway, Rav Ashi chetzio acharon. Rav Ashi said he testified that he saw that its later half, the last part, was written, and he does not testify with regard to the first half, which is the primary section of the get. So Tosfot explained that that's the problem is that people can mix up that document with other documentation. And as we said, as derivative from that, the whole question of Sefer Torah. Because if the scribe did not, when it's come to name of Hashem, did not have the proper kavanah, it may happen that the entire area, the entire section, which can be several columns, need to go to Gniza in some cases. Because you see here how important it is lishma, for the sake of, to have the proper intent, that's the intent when you do that. The same as the Sefer Torah. So the Mishnah said, if the agent bring the get from overseas, and he said, Befanai nichtav kulo, in my present the entire get was written, Ubefanai nechtam chetzio, which means only one of the witnesses signed it, the get pasul, the get is not valid. Omar Rav Chizda, ואפילו שניים מעידים על חתימת יד שני. Even you have two other witnesses that was not the emissary, was not the agent of the husband. They come and testified that the second signature, which means the one that the agent will not testify for that, and they said we recognize that signature, that get pasul, that get is not valid. My tama, you have already one witness that testified, and the other is by the two witnesses that we can trust. They said או כולו בקיום הגט, או כולו בתקנת חכמים. Meaning, either by two witnesses that recognize the two signatures, or the entire works by the agent that brings and said, in my present it was signed, and we take it as two. But if you have a half in that direction, half the other direction, so that get is not valid. Matkif la Rava. Rava objected to this, and he said, Mi'ika midei. Is there any situation one person said, the Iluchad Amar, that if one agent, that it's only one witness, he recognized the signature of the second witness, kasher, this get is valid. Hashta de'ikat trei. Now you have two witnesses that said that they recognize the second witness pasul, you tell me that it's invalid. So it means that if you have two witnesses on testified on the signature of the second one, so the get is valid. And it's the opposite of what Rav Chizda said. So the Gemara said, Ela Amar Rava. Rava says, rather, afilu, even if. 15b, hu ve'acher meidin al chatimat yad sheni pasul. So you have one agent that come with someone else, just Adam min hashuk, someone from the, just you find someone in the street that is not an agent, they testified over the second signature, it's not valid because, as we said, that one witness cannot cover the other, you have to have the two. My tama, what's the reason that this type of bill of divorce is not valid? Because the agent recognized both signatures, and the sages take it as a valid claim. So what's the problem with someone else join him? So Gemara said, Atu le'achlufei. People who see it can mix up between the two, and they bekiyum shtarot de alma. They can mix it with the general documentation, ratification of the documentation, which means that in order to validate this, you have to have two witnesses that recognize both signatures, and you have to have the witnesses that sign, they come themselves, another option, and testified, each of them for his own signature that affirm it. So, why? Because, let's face it, Rashi said, if one of the Eidim, one of the witnesses passed away, he signed and is no longer among the living. So, people mix up and say that you can take one witness and combine it with different one, and therefore you validate it. V'kanafik nechei riv'a de mamona, which means that you can, if when it's come to a monetary disputation, so you can think that you can a full sum of money minus a quarter will be extracted based upon the testimony of one witness. Apuma de Chalsada. So, really, for us to make sure that this legal document is ratified, you have to have two witnesses that come and testify the validity of each of the signatures. If you open the door and you say that one witness is sufficient for his, for example, he is good to testify for his own signature, and another witness join him in testifying about the other signature, so when it's come to this type of get, people will think that that method applies not just for the Gittin, but all the other legal documentations. Matkif la Rav Ashi, mi'ika midi, דילו מעסיק לאיהו לכולי דיבור הכשר, השתא דאיכא אחד בעדי פסול. You tell me that in any situation, when the person himself will complete his entire statement by saying it was written in my present and was signed in my present, the document will be valid. So here, when you have another one who testified with him, so you mean to say that the get is invalid, Amar Rav Ashi, afilu omer, even the agent said, in my present was half sign, in my present, va'ani hu ed sheni, and I am the second witness, that sign in that get, pasul, my tama, why this get is not valid, or kulo bekayom get, which means it should be authenticated entirely through the ratification of the get, in a manner that other documents are ratified, or it must be kulo betakanat chachamim, which the rabbinic decree that said that the testimony of the agent considered equivalent to that of two people who ratified their signatures. None. We learn in Mishnah. If the agent said, "Befanai nechtav kulo," the get was written in my present entirely. "Befanai nechtam chetzio," in my present half of that was signed. Pasul, this get is not valid. So the Gemara asks, "Idach chetzio hechedame." If you tell me of half of it was signed in my present, the get is invalid. What are the circumstances with regard to other half of the get? If you say that there is no one who testified about it at all, it's a problematic. Why? Hashta ed echad omer befanai nichtav ve'echad omer befanai nechtam. One witness said in my present was written, and one said in my present was signed. Dehai dekamashid kula akula ktiva, that one of them testified for the written of the text, v'hai kamashida kula chatima, and one is testified for the entire signature, pasul, the get is not valid, chetzio mibaya. So if half of it was signed in his presence, it is necessary to say that the document is invalid? Ela, you have to say, so you have the Rif and the Yerushalmi said that the issue of the ed, issue of the witness, you have negi'ah. You have some personal motivation with this. The Ridvaz elaborates and he said, you know what happened here? The Sofer, the scribe, is not the one who created the get kritut, the cut of the relationship. He's just the writer. The witnesses who handed over a day mesirah, the people who handed over the get, are the people who cut it. So the scribe has no negiot, has no personal attachment or personal interest in the cutting of the relationship. אלא אמר לך רב חיסדא, ולטעמך בפני נכתב, אבל לא בפני נחתם, למה לי? According to your view, in my present was written, but not in my present one signed. Why the get is not valid? Why the Tana needs to change? So it means that the first segment, the first clause of the Braita is superfluous. So Ella, you have to say lo zu. The Tana of our Mishnah meant to say avzo, not this one, but only, but the other two katani. Hachaname lo zu avzo katani. So it means that you have to have the both. Now the Gemara stop the discussion of our Mishnah and bring another statement of Rav Chisda, dealing also of combining different components. If you remember, on earlier, the very beginning, and also you see it in the previous page, Rav Chisda said that either the entirely you go by the kiyuma get, or entirely by the sage's decree. So here we bring something similar on behalf of Rav Chisda when it's come to partition on Shabbat. Little bit refreshing our memory on Ilchot Shabbat. we have a private domain, we have a public domain. When it's come to a private domain, we have the prohibition of carrying from one domain to another, and the condition it has to be 4 handbreadth by 4 handbreadth that was coming around of a partition that have the heights of 10, at least 10 handbreadth, and is no differentiation between if that was in the heights of the ground and have the partition around it, or it was a cistern that have 10 handbreadth. So Amar Rav Chizda said, Gidud, when it's come to a height disparity between two surfaces, embankment, Chamisha, or 5 handbreadth, Umechitza Chamisha, an additional partition of 5 handbreadth, Ein mitztarfin, do not join together to form a partition of 10 handbreadth. That's basically the minimum heights for a partition to enclose a private domain. Ad sheyehe, until they reach the point, o kulo bimchitza, of the entirely you have the fence, which is the partition, o kulo begidud, or the entirely has to be embankment, which is a pit or incline. Umechitza, and the partition. So Darash Mareimar. So the Mareimar taught, Gidud Chamisha Umechitza Chamisha Mitztarfim. If you have embankment of 5 handbreadth and partition of 5 handbreadth, you can combine, join together to have a form of partition of 10 handbreadth. So here you see a very similar idea, either or. Vehilcheta, and the halakha, mitztarfin, that they join together to 10 handbreadth, together it's considering a reshut hayachid, a private domain. So here, since we talk about combination, we bring another source that can combine several halachic implications. For example, someone kovea suda, he made decision that he's going to eat certain bread. So what did he do? He take water from a vessel that contain at least revi'it, a quarter of log mayim, and and that's the idea of netilat yadayim. You pull out the water in order to wash your hand. That's the Mishnah in first chapter in Tractate Yadayim. You see it also in the Code Orach Chaim 159. So that's basically the vessel has to have a revi'it, a 1/4 of the water. So it's a disputation between Reb Chaim Noah and Chazon Ish. How much is it? The Reb Chaim Noah said that it's 86 cc, I think, the samak, and according to Chazon Ish is 150. But anyway, a person has to have full intent when he washes his hand. One is the Mishnah Berurah said in 158 that we are commanded to go by the sanctification, the sanctity of when we pray to Hashem, when we express something. So they have to have a clarity of hands, clarity of body, because usually people involved with impurity. That's the Ramban said on the Vayikra in Leviticus 19, sentence 2. Also, it's called srach truma, because the hands, Rabbi said, is always involved with a lot of things, and therefore it's very common for people not to pay attention for the state of impurity with the hands. So the rabbis instituted to wash the hands from the early morning negelwasser that you do in the water to a regular meal. So by ilfa yadayim tehorot lachatzaim, או אין תאורות לחצאים, So he said, when it's come to a ritual washing, can one hands be ritually pure in halves, or can they not be ritually pure in halves? Hechedami. What are the circumstances of this case? If you tell me that the two people wash with a requisite of 1/4 log of water, ve'atnan, did we learn in Tractate Gittin, מרביעית נוטלים לידיים לאחד ואפילו לשניים. With the amount of a 1/4 log, one can wash the hands of one person and even of two. So a 1/4 log of water suffices for one person to wash his hands before eating bread, and even two may wash their hands simultaneously with this amount if they do so in a correct manner. ואלא דקמא שחד הידי, here we talk about where one washed his two hands, one by one, not both hands at the same time. והתנן, we learn in Tractate Yadayim, chapter 2, הנוטל ידו בנטילה ואחד בשטיפה, one who purified one hand by washing with a vessel and one hand by immersing in the river, ידיו טהורות, his hands are ritually pure. So this Mishnah indicates that there is no need for both hands to be washed simultaneously. ואלא דקמא שפלגה פלגה דידי, you have here when he washes his hand in two halves, which means he first washes one half of his hand and next washes the second half of that same hand. והאמרי דבי רבי ינאי, ידיים אין טהורות לחצאים, hands cannot rendered ritually pure in halves. So if so, one who washes half of his hand and poses before washing the second half is not performed the act of washing the hands at all. So the Gemara said, lo tzricha, no ilfas question is necessary only for a case, the ika mashke tofeach, where there is a liquid that is still moist on his hand. When one washes the second half of his hand, some moisture remain on the portion of his hand that is already washed, and therefore one might think that this liquid joins with the water with which he washes the second half of his hand. ואי איכא משקה תופח מאי הווה, and where is the liquid that when the one hand moist, so that's, give me an example for that. So they said in Tractate Taharot chapter 8 that vehatnan we learn page 16, hanitzok, a stream of water, vehakatafres, and water descending and incline, umashke, and liquid that rendered an item tofeach, moist, eino chibu, do not connect, lo letum'ah velo letara, neither for ritual impurity nor for purity. So which means if impure water is in one place and become attached to another source of water pouring from it, the water above is not considered attached to the impure water and is not rendered impure. So for sure we're running out of time, but Maharshal and Tosfot also said, since you have the requirement of mikveh to have the 40 seah, so here's the when we discuss mikveot, as you know, there's a huge difference between mikveot by Chabad and other mikveot. One is the top of the other and one side by side. The whole issue is that the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, page 72, speak about the connection between the two mikveot. One, you get the raining water, and one is the transferring from one location to another. So the Gemara said, Lo tzricha de'ika tofeach lehatpiach. So you have to say that where is the liquid that render an item moist enough to render another one item moist. So we see here the half of the hand was washed is not merely slightly moist. It is moist enough to render something else moist. And the Gemara said, "Hanam etanina tofeach le'atpiach chibu." We learn that liquid that render an item moist enough to render another item moist, it connects with another liquid. So what is the ilfaz? A real predicament. So they said, "Hanam etanina tofeach le'atpiach chibu dilma לעניין מקוואות." That's the whole idea of גוד אחית ורבי יהודה היא. דתנן. מקווה שיש בו 40 שאה. That's famous Mishnah in Tractate מקוואות chapter 7. If you have a mikveh that contain ritual bath, that contain a 40 se'ah of water, בכוונות, which is exactly, וירדו שניים, and two people who are impure, וטבלו, the duck, they said in parentheses, שניהם בבת אחת טהורים, בזה אחר זה, if they one follow the other, הראשון טהור, the first one is pure, והשני טמא. Why? Because the first one, when he walk out of the mikveh, he take out some of the water, so now you have less than the amount of needed. So therefore, the second one is still ritually impure. רבי יהודה אומר, אם היו רגליו של ראשון נוגעות במים, אף השני טהור. If the leg of the first one was still attached to the water, so the second person is also ritually pure. The water left on the body of the person who was immersed connect with the water in the ritual bath to constitute the requisite amount of water. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, liquid that rendered an item moist enough to render another item moist, joined together with other liquid. So you see here, but that's not for the mikveh, for the ritual bath. So here you see a state of ambiguity when it's come to this liquid that rendered an item moist enough to render another item moist, joined with the water used to wash the second half of one's hand. So this dilemma, that's what we assume raised by Ilfa. So number one, just two short comments. One, in the poskim there is a big discussion. Like in Eretz Israel, they always have a need of water. So if you have a situation that you need more meg shamim, more raining water, can you freeze, make it like an ice cube, like ice large boxes of ice, of kerach, and you transfer it from one location to another in order to make raining water? So the late Chazon Ish, Rav Karelitz, said you can't do it because of this halacha of tofeach al menat le'atpiach. That's the idea of maim shuvim, and they make it pasul. The same apply when you have netilat yadayim from Am Haaretz, so someone who's not educated. So he carries ritual impurity that can be transferred. The same we said about Hilchot Shabbat or others. You have a towel that is wet, and it was used by someone who's not educated, and you now may have the issue of schita, of squeezing that towel. But also I want to mention the famous Reb Velvele of Brisk, was the great rabbi in Brisk, that one time he saw a mikveh that was in Lithuania before the World War II, and he said that mikveh is kosher, it's okay. And then it was a Slonim Hasid that came there, and he saw that it was a Maim Zochalim, that it was a moving water there, and it makes the mikveh invalid. So then Reb Velvele came there and he said that he is right, so he have a great sorrow for validate originally that mikveh. But in general, the Rivash said that when you have a case like that, which is tofeach menat le'atpiach, so we can mix nachliv bachutz v'lo befnim, that we mix from outside, not inside. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rashab, this thing it's called the middle Rebbe. Anyway, he always have this idea that in the lower mikveh you put a faucet. And that way you can, when it's under the lower mikveh, you can have the water coming in that sense. That the late Divrei Chaim of Tzanz challenged that. But the key idea is, when you're dealing with this, is the tofeach menat le'atpiach, the toilet moist from one location to another. That's basically the difference between mikvehs, that one is side by side and one on top of the other.